I'm reminded of a story about a teacher that writes on the board, ergo cogito sum. I think, therefore I am. One kid in the 5th row turns to the kid in the 4th row and says, Tommy, we don't exist. So I want to ask, but it makes me want to ask, I don't know if I want to live in a totally liberal world or a totally fundamental world. Because I think there's a dynamic pull between opposite poles that somehow compensates, maybe, for our humanness, our frailties, and somehow pulls us maybe into the middle. I don't know, that's the easy answer. Pulls us towards the middle, and that's best, quote unquote. What do you think about that? Is there something good about contrary views, though they be poles apart? I guess
absolutely, absolutely, and that's a big problem with our democracy. Is it's not what do we call the European model is parliamentary.
Opposition.
Yes, not parliamentary, and liberals only have one critic, and that's conservatives, and they're got a 1st century religion and 18th century economics. So we're, a free thinker wants as many critics as possible because we know we don't have the truth. We know that we don't know, but we're trying to get as close as we can, and the only way we can get there is by listening to our critics and criticizing ourselves. But sure, fundamentalisms, I mean, you're not going to drive out of here and run a red light, and who knows what's right. And that's another thing a free-thinking liberal has to admit, is since we don't know what the best route to the future is, we believe we know, we'll argue, but we, in the philosophical view, we're not sure we know, then we have to concede maybe conservatives are right, maybe fundamentalists are right. So what I'm trying to say is we have a huge horizon of free thinking and no barriers in between anymore now that God's not going to send us to hell. And so, go for it.
Just talk about it.
Yes, hi. I just have a comment to make in regards to what this lady said a minute ago and what can we do. And I think that we've learned from Egypt and what's happening in the rest of the world is the only way we're going to get a rein on this totally corrupt government is to, en masse, put a halt to business as usual. And that is the only, I see, it's the only possibility of us snatching back our government.
I've come closer to that view really in the last 2 weeks. But from a different source. I must admit, I get Carl Mumpower's blog every day. He never ceases to blog and write and talk. And he's constantly saying, big government and the nanny state and this and that. And I said, well, but the way the reason the government's corrupt is the business is corrupting and who you're defending. But then I had to say, well, but it's still corrupt, and we do have our Feingold's and our who else? Kucinich. But are the momentum's too strong? So this is another, for instance, are you going to vote for Nader or Obama this year? Is the question. And is there a right answer? No. There's not a right answer. Because we don't know.
There is.
There's a practical answer.
Let's hear the answer.
I said there's a practical
Okay,
answer.
what's the answer?
Vote for somebody who can win.
She says no. So here we have free thinkers disagreeing. And this is a hard choice. To me, electing a black man president was a huge revolution. I mean, that was turning Western civilization on its head. But did it do anything? I don't know. It did something.
He's not a citizen.
He's done.
It's not a citizen.
I noticed that you
He's not a citizen of
seem to talk about liberals versus conservatives or fundamentalists. Saul Alinsky once made a comment to a group of students in which he said that a liberal is a person who thinks radically and acts conservatively. And it seems to me that there is a third option, if you will, and it is the option of acting radically. And I haven't seen a whole lot of radical action in this country in my lifetime. I'm a social worker by profession, and I'm doing some work right now, research, and seeing that in fact there are social workers in the world, some of whom are here, who are speaking in terms of truly challenging the very institutions that you've been talking about in a very profound way. But not just simply being liberals. Because if Alinsky is correct, then liberals don't do anything, they just think radically. So I'm suggesting that the third way might be to begin to formulate ways to act radically, behaviorally.
in a peaceful way.
I'm not into that necessarily.
Well,
That's the only way that'll work.
I define liberalism as everything left of Republicans. So you got your liberals that, what did you say? They think radically and act conservatively.
That's correct. That's what
Of course.
Alinsky said, yes.
We're represented by one of the most extreme of those, the blue dog, he's sure. And then you got your liberals who think radically and act somewhat a little less conservatively, and it goes on to leftists, to communists, to socialists, to anarchists, the whole, and depending on the issue, we can be, different at different times. There's a lot to affirm about America, but there's a lot to change, and I wish we could start march out today and do it. And we could.
They're doing it in Wisconsin.
That's right.
They're not gonna win.
What do you think of the new younger social movements like Zeitgeist that address these issues with very different paradigms? Because the paradigms you're using are pretty antiquated 20th century ones, and the Zeitgeist movement, and it's one of many, looks at the whole question and questions whether or not we need a monetary system or we need a government with two parties, and why not organize economic, social, and political activity around natural resources. So that's one example. Have you looked at these new social movements and thought about these questions?
Well, I have seen the movie Zeitgeist. I don't know how qualified that makes me. But yeah, that's talk about hammer weighing here. Because I think in exchange for a 20-hour work week, that everyone, maybe 30 weeks a year, that everyone could have a basic dignified level of standard of living in America for a population controlled number of people. And that capitalism or other models prevent this idea. And so, to me, we would have a basic economy that had nothing to do with capitalism. That, maybe not money exchanges, maybe, who knows what, but just make sure everybody has basic housing, health care, heat, transportation. Some basic level, that would be the debate.